to the next speaker, which is Tatiana Tavares. I'm very fortunate because she is a colleague of mine that works just next door to my office. And she is a graphic designer. She's in Aotearoa already for, I think, almost a decade, if not a little more. 12 years. 2 decades. 12 years.
20.
Oh, 20. Wow, yeah, 2 decades. Yeah. And she's a graphic designer, but also a storyteller. And there is a huge part of her diasporic journey here that informs in her way. So she is best awards winner. She get gold, she gets silver, she get all this stuff. So it's a student also. It's a lecture here that students love her, and so you can see the amount of respect they have for her. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tatiana Tavares with her presentation.
Oh, thank you so much, Marcos. I'm gonna share my screen and just be with me for a second.
So, Tati, choose the desktop, okay?
Yeah, so it's working now?
It is perfect.
Okay, okay. Oh, thank you so much, everyone. Kia ora, boa tarde, Morena. My name is Tatiana Tavares, and as Marcos said, I'm a senior lecturer in communication design at Aotearoa University in Aotearoa, New Zealand. At the moment, I'm in transit in Mexico and on my way to São Paulo. I'm gonna go and see my mom where I'm from. So this presentation, it's a project that I completed more than 13 years ago, but it still resonates a lot with me and other people. It's called Carnival Land, and it speaks of a storybook created for my Masters of Design and completed in 2012 at Aotearoa University. This is to start my journey. This is my city, São Paulo, and for those people who don't know, it's in the southeast of Brazil, where I was born. You can see on this photograph the Tietê River and all the landscape of the city, because São Paulo is one of the largest populations in the world. And I work for about 10 years as a graphic designer in São Paulo. And I left Brazil in 2004. I was 24 years old, and I left to learn English, to travel, and just to try to see what happened. And this is New Zealand. So you can see the difference here. This is some of the photos of the coastline of the West Auckland and the mountains are south of North Island. And I think from these photographs, you can see the contrast in landscape, culture, lifestyle that I encountered when I arrived in New Zealand. So when I left home and this new country, I went by myself. And, I had to find new friends. It was very hard to get a visa. And I think one of the hardest things was actually the different language. And this is actually the story of many of the immigrants in New Zealand, especially because when I arrived in New Zealand, I worked illegally for about 9 months in a restaurant. And I only secured a job in the end of the first year in graphic design. And I became a resident in 2008. So I'm a citizen now, and I call New Zealand home for, as I said before to Marcus, for about 20 years. So just a little bit of background story. When I secured my residence in 2009, I decided I wanted to do my master's, and I approached AUT with a proposal. But the first few years of my postgrad wasn't really what I expected. I had been working commercially for many years, and at that time, I don't think I really understood what research meant. I don't think I was prepared to undertake a personal project, and I think after 2 years doing my master's, I was almost failing because I didn't really like my project. I worked very hard, and I was trying to understand how to write in English at the academic level. And I was just really not wanting to continue anymore. But I changed my supervision team and encouraged by my supervisor, Professor Wellbeings. He suggested me to take a break. And on that summer, I hadn't been back home to see my family for about 5 years. And I was really homesick. So I felt that maybe it would be a really good time for me to go home and to think about what I really wanted to do. And I think I wanted to see my family and really find my creative voice. Um, that's when I arrived in Brazil in 2011 after 5 years. And that was during Carnival. And I really didn't like Carnival. I never really liked Carnival. And I thought it was beautiful, but overly decorated and with a lot of exposed naked bodies. But I think when I arrived after 5 years, and I was away from home, and I had to watch Carnival on TV, and I think somehow it made me realize that there was something important about Carnival, and somehow in strange ways, there was something important for me. And I think I begin to see Carnival a little bit more complex, maybe more like a festival of dreams. And somehow there were equivalences between Carnival and my confusion where I belonged. And I think at the time I asked myself a lot what really had happened to me in immigration and who I was artistically, culturally. And I think through Carnival, I really realized that I perhaps wore masks while I was searching for who I was. And that's when Carnival Land emerged. After 3 months in Brazil, I returned to New Zealand and I wanted to tell a story. And I think Carnival became this story that it's about my questions, my questioning, and is a story in form of metaphors. And it tells a tale of immigration and also a quest for my dreams. So for this project, the metaphor of Carnival serves as the primary metaphor for my experience as an immigrant to New Zealand. And I use many contextual ideas that bring equivalences between Carnival and immigration. Um, Etymologically, the word Carnival means carnevale, the farewell to the flesh, and the participant disrupts order by letting go of the self in the pursuit of a new self. So Carnival Land is a graphic novel, and I combine photo montage and creative writing into an illustrated storybook. And the story tells the transformation of this young woman, and she was in a journey for a place to belong. And her dreams appear as costumes in a carnival parade. But the story is not a very happy story because it's a story of exploitation, and she follows promises and she tries to find out who she is. And the artifact is compiled into a large book with a series of images, and I took photographs of friends, actors, including myself, and you can see some little photographs, very texture and images, and big ones that opens into these big spreads like this one here. So after the completion of my master's, the project received many awards from New Zealand Best Awards, Australian Illustration Awards, and New Zealand Chorus Network, where I was invited to showcase my work in Times Square in New York. So like you can see the image here. I was also invited to present my project internationally, which basically initiated my academic career. I wasn't planning to be a teacher or a lecturer. And from this project, I really enjoy research. And that opened up for a lot of collaborations, and I got a job in an academic institution. So it was a very mind-blowing result for a project that I really almost failed. So I really, really love this project. And so to give you some insights, I will tell you very briefly the story of Carnival Land. These are just the main points of the story, but the whole book is about 30 illustrations. It starts with the main character as a young girl, and she tells that her mother died when she was very young, and her mother was the queen of drums at a carnival parade. The story continues until she grows up, very poor, becoming a seamstress, sewing costumes for other people, and she dreamed of being part of the parade one day as a queen of drums. So one day, a bird, a Wirapuru bird, appears at her window and promises to take her to Carnival Land so she could become the Queen of Drums. The Carnival Land was a place where she could reach her dreams by building a carnival costume, but she needed to work really hard to pursue her heart's desire. Just an explanation note, the bird is Amazonian bird, and the association comes from the annual song and the carnival parade. In the story, the bird is authority and decides who may remain in after judging, depending on whether their costumes represent a true wish or false desire. So also in this world, she needs to find work to afford her carnival costumes. She then discovers there were no jobs for newcomers, and not even the reptile man had work for someone like her. When all seemed lost, the emerald jeweler asked her to borrow a necklace from the reptiles man's shop so she could find her job. In consequence, the reptile man finds out and arrives at her door with accusations and brands her with the mark of a thief, and she's casted out into the streets. Our explanation note is the reptile man and the emerald jeweler represent illegal employment and work challenges and financial stability as a new immigrant in New Zealand. So betraying her true desires, she wandered without purpose until an acrobat found her and invited her to his camp. She was covering the mark with her arm. The acrobat brings her to his world. There was music and laughter. They were preparing their costume for the annual carnival parade. Oops. They're also branded and being played tricks just like her. In this road, the acrobat said they had no time to lose making their costumes. Soon they would be traveling to the mirror of selves. So the acrobat, Patty, and the community represents this family structure, which brings certainty and security in the stable world of Carnival Land. So that's when they travel to the mirror of selves. When they complete their costumes, they all together take the road leading to the mirror of selves. And when they arrived, she wished the acrobat well and started to get prepared for the moment. This was the place where dreams were made true. And suddenly, standing in front of the mirror, the transformation happens. The brain on her arm disappeared and her dreams had become reality. She was the Queen of Drums. After the transformation, the bird was waiting for her and whispered, "So where is home?" She looks at both worlds and answers, "Home is in my heart." The bird laughed and said, "Then you're ready to travel between worlds. Go now and live your dreams." Just having talked about this story, I will present some aspects of the process and the contextual framework. In the story, I used autoethnography as a methodology that assessed my personal experience, and I intended to create more deeper dialogue between the reader and the author and inspire readers to reflect on their own experience. I also use heuristic inquiry as I fuse the world I experience as fiction with the world I experience as reality. In this sense, I'm embodying myself into the story as the main character. I also reflected a lot with the people I encounter, like the reptile man and people I met, my experiences with Carnival, and also my feelings as an immigrant. The story development started with about 4,000 words where I detail all the world all the characters of the story, and got reduced to about 600 words where was able to define the main parts of the narrative. And to create the illustrations, I used Photoshop, and I went through a process of trial and error by developing individual illustrations. But one of the interesting aspects to develop the visual style is that I lived on the world of the illustrations for many days. I worked for many days in one illustrations where I could feel that world for a while. The project is also framed with a number of contextual concepts. I use many metaphors, including the acting of performance. And through these three ideas of the polyphonic melody, the theatrical engagement, the performance. So the construction of the language on the book changes in emphasis. So I start with the story in Portuguese, and the typography is larger and more has more hierarchy. And when she arrives to Carnival Land, English becomes more predominant. And by finishing the story, both languages are equalized. The theatrical, it's also presented on the folding and unfolding of the spreads, like opening the theatrical curtains. The book is also constructed as like a concertina or accordion binding that forms a type of pop-up that brings movement to the book. So the construction of the book is also very theatrical. Another contextual idea is the metaphor, the bricolaged identity, where I employ Levi-Strauss' theoretical concept of bricolage and describe bricolage in three different ways, through carnival, immigration, and collage. Carnival, it's a reassemblage through dressing. Immigration, it's also a reassemblage of the self through social cultural transformations. And collage is a creative method of reassemblage of photographic fragments. Another theoretical concept is the rite of passage, and this concept has been used mainly on the construction of the story. And the rites of passage are generally associated with transformation in ritual and tribal ceremonies. And theoretically, is often defined in three steps: the beginning, separation, liminality, and aggregation. Using this idea, most of the story has been thought as a liminal phase, where the story mostly happens and indicates this in-between phase that the character lives, a period where the immigrant or the character doesn't belong on the present state. And in this sense, Carnival immigration are luminous. Carnival is a symbolic rite of passage that allows people to imagine new beginnings, while immigration is also a very ambiguous process of in-between that the immigrant experiences in order to adapt to a new place. So the next page. I think that's the end. I think after I discussed those two concepts, I really like this quote to finish the presentation, because it talks about dreams and loneliness and maybe wonder when we seek to new horizons. And oops, what is it? Oh, yeah. And it's a quote by Oscar Wilde, and he wrote in 1976, and he says that a dreamer is one who can only find his way by the moonlight, and his punishment is that he sees the dawn before the rest of the world. And I think for me, this speaks more like of someone who has dreams of another world or a new life, like an immigrant, or someone who can imagine what is not yet present. And I think like a researcher, you must find your way through darkness sometimes and without a map, and because what we see sometimes doesn't come into form yet. So yeah, that's the end of the presentation. Thank you for watching. Obrigada. And I'm open to questions or anything. Thank you. I don't know if I went for 20 minutes, Marcus, or I was really quick.
You are like a Swiss watch. It
Ah!
was okay. Yeah.
Was it 20 minutes? Oh, okay, thank you.
So I have one question here, Tachi, if you like to talk about. It is, thank you for the presentation, and I love it. You're a successful
Oh.
graphic designer woman in New Zealand. How difficult was to establish yourself as a professional and as a student? And what do you recommend for someone who wants to follow your pathway and go overseas to study and work? I think that's the translation.
Hardship, Marcus, I think, and persistence. I
So,
think that my
Tachi,
journey.
could you stop sharing so you can see your whole
Yeah,
window yourself?
okay, yeah,
Yeah, could you answer again?
yeah, that's me. I would say it's hardship, persistence, and I think I wouldn't imagine that it's easy to find your personal voice. And I think most of my journey as a designer, graphic designer, illustrator is that my personal experience became my creative voice. And I think it took me some time to become a little bit more confident to what I wanted to say to the world. And yeah, I think as a creative person, that became quite essential for me, all the struggle I went through to really reflect on my culture, reflect on my experience. And I think that's mostly because I like storytelling. And for me, storytelling is about reflecting, um, life in general. So I think it all adds to it in a way. Uh, so I don't know if you ask me in terms of the being an immigrant or being a creative person, because
Yeah,
they
no,
both their struggles are different, but I'm sure they both have a similar struggle. Yeah.
and do you think as a woman was something harder that you noticed, Tatiana? As a woman here, you thought that was even harder.
Ah,
What do you think about that?
I don't know if that's something that creatively came to my, as a reflection, but I think so. I think that it is always part of becoming more confident as well. I mean, I came by myself. I went by myself to New Zealand, so that certainly posed me a lot of questions. And in the beginning, I think I was a little bit like a young you, and I think I matured a lot in terms of feeling more confident to travel the world and to do what I wanted to do. But being a woman and an immigrant certainly is, yeah, is difficult.
So there is another one that is you mentioned that you have been doing commercial design work before. What's the
Yeah.
difference? What it requires to do something that is personal? What's the difference? I think alongside these lines, the translation, does it make sense? I think you
And
froze.
commercial.
Sorry, Touch, I think
But
you froze.
search and
Can
academic.
you repeat? I think you are fading.
Oh. Oh, sorry, can
Perhaps
you
you want,
repeat again, Marcus? I think it just broke.
yeah, so perhaps you want to take your video out? Oh, no, no, it's back. Okay. So I think the question is that you mentioned that you have been doing some
Uh,
graphic design work.
sorry?
Yeah, can you take your video perhaps out? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear now. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so I think the question is you mentioned that you have done some commercial work in graphic design. And the question is, what is the difference between doing commercial work in graphic design and taking a research that is so deeply personal? What are the difference? What are the pros and cons? What are the things you could tell are different, especially for someone coming from the industry wanting to progress into a research career or something like that? Could you talk a little bit how is to work with a personal project that's different from work with a commercial packaging project or something like that?
Mm, Yeah, I think when you work, from my experiences with autoethnography or a project about the self, you have to be prepared to be exposed because you have to assess the experience over and over again. So that's how you can get the deepest levels of originality on the work. So I think for me, this is the first part of working with a personal project. You have to be prepared for it. It's not something that everybody can do. It's not something that it can be. It needs to be done in a way that you understand that you are part of the world, and by reflecting on you, are reflecting the world. So I think that's very important initially. Of course, the commercially for me is a very different experience I have with it. I have to have empathy with my public, but the pace of a design studio, the level of research, arguably can be very different because you're not placing yourself at the center of the inquiry all the time. Um, so I think there's, of course, very different contexts when you work with when you work commercially and you work with research. Yeah, I think that mostly is this, Marcus. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tati. It was wonderful. I'm a big fan of these projects.
Marcus, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you for inviting me. It is a project that is more than 13 years, and I'm still showing it around. So it's really nice. Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. It's beautiful, and I'm sure you inspire so many people around the world, Tati.